And today we're going to be talking about chapter 1 and the forward and intro of the staff engineer's path. So I'll kick it off with the first item here. So in the intro, I think the three pillars are laid out, which is like kind of going to be what the discussion of the entire book is. And so there's big picture thinking, execution of projects, and leveling up the engineers that you work with. So I'm curious, I mean, do you agree with this list? Do you see some things that are not on this list that should be? And just what do you think in general of those ideas? I personally thought it was a pretty like all-encompassing list. I mean, it's somewhat generic, but specifically like at GitLab, I do think big picture thinking and execution of projects are kind of intertwined with how staff engineers seem to work here. Like they see these large problems and find solutions, and whether or not they're the ones that are actually completing them is not necessarily true, but they might be the ones leading the project and delegating the work to other engineers.
Yeah, I think I could see like leveling up engineers you work with is like in the documentation that you do. And like, I feel like our meetings are pretty thoughtful and, you know, having like an agenda in every meeting and how we work asynchronously. Like I mainly work with a couple people like in Australia, and you know we sync up you know later in the afternoon, but we're able to like pass along information and kind of it feels like almost like a continuous workflow where you know they work on something while I'm asleep, you know, asleep or after hours, and wake up in the morning, go to work, and like there's a continuation of it, and it just kind of it's almost like a feedback loop, which is really nice.
I see the leveling up theme in interactions I've had with Steve Hu. He whenever he updates a ticket and he does some like pretty deep investigation, he includes, not always, but a lot of the time he includes what what steps he used, what tools he used to do his investigation. That's a lesson for me.
I think leveling up also is about kind of avoiding that you become a bottleneck. And right, I mean, you're working at a higher level than most people, but not in the sense that you should be the only one who is able to tackle certain things. You should actually avoid that. And if you start noticing that and people come to you with stuff that they think they can only come to you, you should say, no, I'm happy to give you advice, but you could do this yourself. And here is how. This is what I understand from leveling up.
What I think is so important about like writing out how you got somewhere, it helps people for like if they run into that same problem, but also it shows them I don't have any magic. This is what I did. You could do it too.
Awesome. Cool. We can jump to the next one here. So in chapter 1, there were some notes about like kind of looking at the big picture. And so just as important as seeing the big picture of the situation is being able to anticipate how your decisions will play out in the future. On the topic of big picture and scope, how do you think about scope beyond your project or your group or even your department? And so how often are you considering decisions that you make that, you know, like how they're going to play out over a year, or, you know, how they might not play out as you see? I thought that was kind of like an interesting topic because it's one that's really easy to not think about. You just see like, here's what I'm working on, I'm going to do it. Not necessarily, here's what I'm working on, what does this mean in the long term? And so I know we have like some staff and some other like various level folks here. So I'm curious what everyone like kind of like does to think about these things in their roles.
I thought, I hope I'm not skipping ahead by bringing this up, but I thought it was interesting how at the end of chapter 1, there was the discussion of reporting structure and how which level you're reporting to can affect the scope of your role as a staff engineer. currently I am reporting to like a line manager, she calls it, right? So like I report to a manager. There are a lot of senior engineers and other level engineers report to that line manager. So I actually don't know if I feel like my scope is a lot higher. I think that I aim to have a wider view, and I would like to have a wider view, but the reporting structure makes it such that like I feel invested in the team and what the team's doing. And that's actually changing for me. I'm going to be reporting up to the next level soon. So I'll be interested in how that affects kind of my view. I think the hope with that change is that I will be able to have a wider view. But I don't know how the common that is at GitLab. I don't know how many staff engineers here are higher in the reporting structure versus kind of embedded with an engineering team.
Notice that have like staff tends to be reporting to the line managers, but they're at least in infrastructure. There's also the distinguished the staff plus stuff, the distinguished engineers, and I think it's fellow. I don't remember. There's another one about that, and they do report at that higher level, much higher, and that looked that felt like it matched what she was talking about, and the author was talking about in those broader perspectives. To answer the question a little bit too, I thought it was I think about this a lot when I'm working on things, because I have seen through my career now that if you don't think about those things, it can be a little difficult. I mean, at bigger companies, it can be more interesting because I've worked in smaller startups where everything you do can have a very large impact, even when you do not intend that. But at a company the size of GitLab, or I've worked at Apple too, and then I try making a ripple in that pond. But you at a company like GitLab, you can still have that impact, but it is harder to immediately see. But it's still a very good thing to be thinking about, because future, I like to think about the future you problems. Maybe it's not actually you, but it's going to be somebody, and that either you are going to hate what you did before, or somebody else is going to hate you.
Yeah, I think it's
We've,
interesting.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. Okay. Yeah, the size of GitLab, I think it's the right size where like you can kind of stay in your little bubble of maybe like your section, I guess, and be very focused, and kind of like that's your entire world. But it is interesting to like kind of step out sometimes and look at the company as a whole, because like I think I was on the package stage for like 3.5 years, and like it wasn't until I started to see like the use of the package tools in respect to the other tools that I started to understand the scope of the impact in comparison to some of the other features, and that kind of made me think about it differently, and how to like target users and propose features, because of just like understanding where it fits in that sort of big picture.
Yeah, so we've been talking quite a bit about sort of the formal structures and management structures in particular. And I guess for me, a big part is also the more informal structures and relationships, and kind of building relationships across the org with other teams is a huge part of just understanding a broader scope, and understanding what other people are working on, and identifying themes, and also being able to delegate and/or ask questions, escalate issues. So I'm not an expert in every area, but if I know someone that I can talk to on most of the teams that I interact with, then I have a trusted partner, and I can sort of give them that problem and know that it will be taken care of.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what stable counterparts are all about, right? That you can form these connections between groups that are not necessarily working together directly otherwise. At least for me, once I started being a support stable counterpart for 2 product groups, I very, very quickly felt that these connections do have a different quality and give me a picture of things I would not get otherwise, and that is super valuable. Even though I'm, to this day, after more than half a year in the role, still very much figuring out what a support stable counterpart actually is supposed to do. But still, from the very beginning, I felt, okay, this is big and good and important.
That note of being new, what is a stable counterpart?
Well, I wish I could give you a definitive answer. It's something I've been thinking about a lot recently, and I'm still trying to understand. The general idea is that a stable counterpart is a constant person that you can speak to, like I'm the support stable counterpart in pipeline authoring and in pipeline execution. So everyone in these groups, when they want to talk to support, they know, oh, Manu is there. They can talk to me first. I can figure out who is the best person in support to talk about this, things like that. It's a lower barrier, right? You don't have to, oh, do I go through this Slack channel? Who should I pick? Let's just ask Manu. I'm already here. And similarly, like the product manager for a group is in itself, of course, a stable counterpart. It's always the same person as well.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, that like we have these counterparts in a lot of areas of the company that sort of create these relationships automatically. But it is still, I like how Igor kind of went through it. Like it's worth pursuing these relationships and you know, getting out to farther parts of the company, which that's another topic, I guess, in and of itself is how do you go about doing that? How do you get out of your group and your section, or even, you know, beyond your stable counterparts? I mean, I
join
find
a book club.
Exactly.
I think there
Yeah,
are
I
some
think-
other. Okay.
Oh, I was gonna say, I feel like I've like kind of indirectly gotten this feedback from like this is my first time working in an asynchronous organization, as I'm sure it is for many of us. And I always have in the past have really relied on just like, hey, we're all on Slack about the same hours. So we kind of just like chit chat, you know, and you build relationships that way, of course, also through regular one-on-ones. And now on my team, because of time zones, like it would be quite difficult to do regular one-on-ones. And then that's true also for people across the organization. So I think in my first 6 months here have been a little bit lazy about setting those up and have just been like doing work and doing the execution pillar really hard. But definitely like want to focus more energy on the build relationships aspect. I don't know which part of the pillar that would be, but.
Funny thing is, I was just about to say that, like, I like the meeting folks in various Slack channels and things around various interests, and I think that's a good way to connect too. So it does still exist, but it's definitely very different here. You know, I'm in all caps. I'm in an emojis channel. You know, there's all kinds of fun places to goof off and see, oh, who is that? What do they do? Oh, this is interesting. And then you can set up a coffee chat. Plus, I love the donut stuff for that. There's the donut channel, and then at least for infrastructure, there's a specific donut channel for infrastructure, and that has been really helpful to, you know, you don't have to think about it. Set up those coffee chats.
Sorry, I feel with like the remote setup here, it's harder. It's definitely harder, and it requires more energy. In previous roles where I was on site, you know, it's less anxiety, less stress. to just meet someone incidentally or walk by them. Now it's like you have to make an effort. And so I don't know about the rest of you, but I'll have weeks where I feel like I can make the effort and I have that headspace, and I'll have other weeks where I'm like, I just need to be alone and I can't put that effort in.
Yeah, I
I
agree.
guess
I was gonna say that,
that's
yeah,
sort
like
of
those 5-minute chats that you have like in the hallway, are super hard to replicate at GitLab. Like schedule coffee chats, but it's kind of like you're trying to commit to a half hour of chatting with someone, which is really hard. I mean, and sometimes they don't go for that full time, which is fine, but it is awkward to try to create those relationships in a specific way.
Yeah, I was gonna segue into kind of time management and being intentional about how much time you spend, well, in coffee chats or meetings in general. And the way that I approach it is I try and put all of my meetings on one single day in the week, which can be a lot at times, but it sort of gives me a quota in a sense. And I can look at my calendar and see, well, Wednesday, do I still have some space? Or is it completely empty? Maybe I do want to get to know someone. And so I can sort of schedule it very meticulously and intentionally that way. And I'm curious to hear how other people approach that.
That's an interesting concept. I think that maybe raises something else that may be valid. Maybe as a company-wide concept, we can further encourage like a get to know you type of a day for meetings like that company-wide, and that might encourage others to more proactively do it too. I'm not sure.
Okay. And I think we kind of covered what Ahmed has put here as well. I don't know if we wanted to add any more comments about, the different levels and how the reporting works at GitLab. If anyone had any other thoughts they wanted to add here.
I just wanted to add on that, like, I think one of the big takeaways for me from this is embrace uncertainty. Like, it's gonna be unclear. That's okay. Do it. Don't like hide away from it. And I think that what he wrote there is one example of the uncertainty that comes with what we're all talking about. Yeah, I just think uncertainty is the takeaway.
Yeah, I think that makes sense to me too. Uncertainty and each team is different in what they need from a staff engineer, and they may be perfectly tailored to who you are, and that may be how it fits too. And it may be that you bring and define that role more specifically as well. It just depends on the situation and the person.
It depends. Which is so
I was
often
just
the
thinking
answer.
that.
Does that mean I'm a senior engineer now?
Exactly.
I guess one other thing regarding scope and how scope aligns and sometimes doesn't align with the reporting structure. I feel like, I mean, maybe this depends on which part of the company you're in and other factors, but I feel like at GitLab, with also sort of the manager of one ideology, it makes it gives you a lot of freedom to decide how you want to structure your work, and it gives you a lot of opportunity to sort of broaden the scope of your work if you want to. And I guess one idea that comes to mind around that is when you're looking to get promoted and sort of be like get to the next level, it'll often be the case that there is some sort of expectation that you're already operating to some extent at that level, and sort of that at that point the promotion becomes a formality, more or less, right? And so I guess with regards to reporting structures, that means I wouldn't see that as limiting, but rather a boundary that you can push on and say, well, I'm not reporting to so-and-so, but I am interested in this large initiative, or I do want to connect with this other person in this other team and see what they are working on. And just because you're not reporting at that level doesn't mean that you can't start exploring that.
I agree with that. I think, like, because I've gotten interested in things outside of my group or outside of my area, and or I've been interested in like joining in some meetings that like maybe I wasn't invited to or I wasn't really a part of. And my experience at GitLab is, if I ask, it's generally the answer is sure. If you have time and you want to explore this, then that's totally encouraged, which I think is great. All right, Andy, did you want to go over your comment?
Sure. One small preface to this is that I actually put this in the wrong group before, and there were more staff plus people in that group. So it's kind of weirdly worded, but I'm going to ask it anyway because I think it's still relevant. Which is that I was struck by the quote that technical leadership needs to be part of the job description of the person doing it. It isn't a distraction from the job. It is the job. And I'm wondering, I'm new to GitLab, so I'm wondering like how I've seen that tension at other companies and other situations where senior leaders, you know, have to balance that coding, and the balance can get out of whack. I'm curious to know what people have seen, what people oh, and I've got a meeting too. So yeah, I'm just curious on perspectives on how that balance gets struck at GitLab, what expectations seem to be, or that kind of thing.
Well, I can speak to that from my standpoint of where I sit. I don't, but it's unique to I think the team, you know, so I'll preface it with that. I don't have any reduction in the coding noticeably between my previous being senior and staff, but there is, because it will involve more trying to establish guidelines, getting buy-in to certain concepts in the engineering teammates, things like that. That'll happen feels like it's happening naturally more than being forced.
And I'm actually especially wondering about kind of, you know, is there space given to the non-coding tasks, you know?
I feel like there is, but it goes along with the manager of one concept. And I've always been thought of fairly autonomously, so I don't look for someone giving me space. I make the space and just make sure the product managers are happy with the workflow, and then I do with my time as I see fits the company.
That's what I've seen. Like I think it is kind of team dependent, because I've seen a team where there's only 2 engineers and 1 is a staff. So the thing that's needed on that team is to get the work done, and so that's what the staff does. And then as the team expands, suddenly their time gets freed up to work on other things. So it's very fluid and dependent, I think, on what the need is at the time.
Yeah, I guess my experience is also that one of the things that does kind of come with the territory is as you become established as a trusted leader or just trusted person, people will come to you. And there's I get pinged on so many random things every week, and it's sort of part of the job to triage that stuff and see which of these I want to spend an hour on and which I want to spend 2 minutes on, and which I can ignore, which I can delegate. So yeah, I guess that's sort of one way in which that has manifested for me. And yeah.
All right. Well, we are right at the end of GitLab overtime here, so I'm gonna have to cut us all off. But I'm really glad we were able to get together, and this is a great discussion. So look forward to everyone joining next week
Did you
for
meet?
chapter 2.
Or-
Oh,
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks,
all right.
y'all.
Thanks, everyone.